Jon Kirkpatrick.
Hello.
You are Head of Sustainability at Lend Lease. Thanks for joining us. You spoke in the conference quite passionately about the real need to move away from this whole concept of sustainable design towards innovation. What's driving this one-man mission as you described it?
I think the reality is people are becoming oversaturated with the word. I think it's very easy for sustainability to generate visions of environmentalism, or easily go from one route to another. And if you start talking about sustainability, people either engage and they understand it, or they switch off because they don't want to understand it. Either way, you get put into a box.
Right.
And it's very hard then to have the real conversation around what needs to happen on projects, which is the reality. If you start talking about the word sustainability and you stop talking about actually the outcomes of sustainability.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really driving this concept that sustainability shouldn't be the topic of discussion. It should be actually what you're trying to achieve through sustainability.
Right, yeah.
And a lot of the work we're doing at Lend Lease is understanding that when we say sustainability, we don't actually mean necessarily green. We mean so much more than that. We mean innovation. We mean understanding this is what it means to us as a business.
But I suppose one of the key areas that you are that's on the top of the radar right now is the whole idea of livability and urbanisation. We are looking at a situation where 70% of the population will be living in cities by 2050.
Sure.
Big challenges around there. Are they opportunities? Are they threats? I mean, how do you see them? Is this a crisis?
Is it a crisis? In some areas, yes, I think it is actually. In terms of opportunities always come out of crisis and threats. I think if you're there to capitalise on it, I think you really have to see it that way. And I think we will see it that way. I think the entire industry will have to see it that way. In terms of this livability concept, I think it's recognising that actually, I think we got caught up in ourselves as an industry. I think we start talking about sustainability, we start talking about energy efficient buildings, we've missed the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is actually people.
Right.
It's about understanding that people are the end users. We're actually doing this for people. People will be living in these homes, they'll be working in these offices. So why are we designing offices for offices' sake or homes for home's sake? Why are we not looking at the end users and saying, how do you want to live your life? How do you want to utilise this office space? How do you want to work? And we should be shaping our projects around what those people want. Yeah. Because if you don't, you're going to miss the mark.
Well, you've got some interesting ideas going on at Elephant and Castle, all to do with trying to make that link between how people live, how people want to transport themselves around. Do they want to live where they work, etc. I mean, where are we making progress towards? I was going to say the more sustainable lifestyles, but more innovative lifestyles.
I think they are. I think that's very much the case. And Elephant and Castle is a fantastic example. We've got a project there that I think people forget about. Elephant and Castle. Everyone thinks it's much further south than it really is. It's Zone 1 London. It's got fantastic connections in terms of transport, in terms of tube lines, above ground sort of trains, looking at cycling networks and so on. It's one of the most connected spaces in London, if I'm completely honest. But that means you can actually do anything you want from there. You can live there, work there, whatever you need to do, and still be connected to London. You could be right in the heart of central London in another 10 minutes. So it's about having all those things and having those connections together, and it feeding into how you want to operate in that space.
Which I suppose is another point you made earlier was, business as usual and not enough. And I suppose thinking about those kind of designs in the same old ways it isn't enough. Are we geared up? Do we have the skills? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the clients that are able to think differently?
So, I mean, I am quite lucky within my company in the basis of if we're doing developments, often we are our own client.
Yeah.
So if we get it wrong, it's our own fault for getting the brief wrong, which is quite crucial. But yeah, exactly. Looking at projects like Elephant and Castle, it's moving away from business as usual. I think at the moment, the industry is focusing on reducing impacts, looking at negativity. How do you actually reduce those elements? And reality, we need to go beyond that. Zero is not enough, is the reality we're in. Yeah. I think we're at that point now where we need to start talking about positivity. What can a project do to have a positive impact on on the projects around it? It's not just within its own boundaries.
Because while even if you're your own client, you still need to get investors. You still need to get people who are going to be buying your residential property.
Absolutely.
And so making that credible
And the world's changing. We're in a scenario now where, I mean, we were talking earlier on around leadership and governments having a role to play, and I think they do. But I think we've moved on from that now. I don't think we're in a scenario where we can rely on government to actually make all those decisions for us, because the younger generations are far smarter, far more switched on than we are, and they're catching up. I had a fantastic example not too long ago. We built a college over in Greenwich, and I was lucky enough after we finished the construction to walk around it with a few of the potential young children, but they weren't actually young adults going to college the following year, and there were prospective students looking around, and they were asking all the usual questions, you know, about holidays and where's the library. But one young woman at the back put her hands up as we were going around and asked somebody, this is fantastic building, love it, it's fantastic. What's the actual energy efficiency rating of the building? And this person was 17 years old, and I was floored by that. And I didn't prompt them, didn't ask any questions, but I pulled her to one side after and said, why did you ask that question? And she said, well, it's part of our generation have an interest in the environment and what's going on, but equally, I'm investing my money in my education, and I want to know where it's spent. So I think we've got this interesting sort of perfect storm where government's coming from one side in terms of doing the right thing, clients are demanding it, but also I think a younger generation are catching up and are expecting it.
The users want to know these things.
Absolutely. It's becoming expectation.
So I suppose in a world of projects that we're talking about the major projects that are on the stocks for the infrastructure sector. Is there any I suppose feeling that perhaps quite often we are driven towards these projects because they're the ones with government support, they're the ones with cross-party political support, rather than being necessarily the ones that the end users are really going to have their lives changed by? Is there a risk of that?
So I think that's potentially true. I think that there is a risk of that. But I think the really interesting thing is when we start talking about why are some of these big infrastructure projects the sustainable leaders, and the reality is you've got scope on those projects. You've got the ability to take on a whole range of different elements, and you can actually tackle some of them. The Olympic Games was a classic example. Some of the other projects we're doing in around London, where we're doing big urban regeneration projects, you've actually got more opportunities, let alone tackling those sorts of elements. So again, there's problems with those as well. There's lots of stakeholders, lots of people getting involved, lots of people to keep happy in those scenarios. But I do think you have more opportunities in some of those schemes to actually have that impact on people's lives. And that's really where I think the focus gets driven. So despite the fact you did come across as being something of the pessimist on the panel earlier on, you were feeling positive about the whole the routes to innovation. I think for me the pessimism element is we can't actually put our heads in the sand. The reality is this is going to happen whether we like it or not, and we're either on the train or we're not, and I think we have to be on the train. So the point I was making earlier on, particularly on the panel, was whilst I think there is some big issues, some big challenges, from urbanisation to resource efficiency to carbon to all the big picture things, jobs, training, skills, we actually have an opportunity to get ahead of those and actually capitalise on that and actually make something positive out of a currently negative trajectory, I think. Well, good luck with that, Jon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us, Jon Kirkpatrick from Lend Lease. Thanks.
Thank you very much.